Welcome back, everyone. For those joining us the first time, this is the fourth and final installment of the Knoxville Public Library's Voter Education Series, hosted and taught by Melissa Molloy. Melissa is a graduate from Knoxville High School and a more recent graduate of Reed College in Oregon. While there, she studied international and comparative policy studies. We're still lucky to have her around for a while before she moves on to law school, where she plans on focusing her studies on election or employment law. Over the past few weeks, we've been able to get answers to our questions about the history of voting in the US, as well as an explanation of the voting process itself. We've learned why our vote matters, why it's not a waste of time, and we've learned how to respond to all the common objections against voting. Last week, we learned how to be responsible voters who engage confidently with the media and know how to think critically and fact check. All of that leads us up to tonight, the actual ballot. Many of you may have already received your ballot in the mail. Others of you have the date marked on the calendar for in-person voting. Melissa is ready to walk us through our ballots. I'll hand it over to you now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for the last session here tonight. I'm not really expecting this session to go for a full hour. I'm gonna, like Heather said, walk you through the ballot. Because I don't know about you, but when I've voted in the past, just, as soon as I get past the major races, I've been like, what's the point of this? And, not really knowing anything about the candidates or why I should be voting for them. So it has been a learning experience for me to figure out kind of what some of these local offices are and what they do, and stuff along those lines. So I printed out a sample ballot, and this is what I used as a reference for building my class tonight. I also want to thank the Marion County Auditor's Office for being so helpful. They sent me the sample ballot as soon as it became available about a week and a half ago, as well as gave me the contact information for many of the local races. So I was able to reach out to everyone for comment who I'm going to be talking about in the presentation today. Two folks got back to me, so I'm going to talk about what they told me on the phone when I spoke with them. As well as got some really cool information from them about that. And you might be recognizing from the news literacy class last week. I essentially did some reporting on the candidates this week, and so in good journalistic techniques, I reached out to folks and asked them for comment, although most people didn't bite, but that's totally okay. I do want to talk briefly before I get into the thick of things about before we begin. So this presentation does deal explicitly with partisan candidates and issues. So to maintain neutrality during the slideshow, the same information will be presented for candidates on all sides. So on partisan races specifically. So I have their official candidate photograph. I talk about their education and their profession up until this point, any previous government office that they held, two notable endorsements that I could find about them either on their websites or from press releases, and then the top 3 issues listed on their campaign website exactly as they are written. So things it will not include are like candidate or campaign scandals. I will not be talking about approval ratings or polling numbers. I'm also, for the sake of time, not going to be talking about the candidates from non-major parties, because as you may remember from a couple weeks ago, I talked how especially in major races, unfortunately, our system is not really set up to have third-party candidates at this point. And if you're interested in getting third-party candidates elected, definitely become an advocate for ranked choice voting so that we could potentially see something like that. But my general recommendation is to vote for major party candidates. And if you're trying to push your party in a specific direction, get involved in the primaries, as well as, like I said, talk about ranked choice and try and get it implemented in your state. And so as far as ordering the candidates, in the order they talk about them, so they'll be discussed in the order of incumbent and then challenger. And if the seat is open, which means that there's no incumbent running, the party that formerly held the seat will be presented first. So in this presentation, will not advocate for you to vote for a specific candidate or any office. Like I have been saying this whole time, my only purpose here is to encourage you to vote and to be an educated voter and to be an educated citizen. And finally, there's just no way for me to give you a complete picture of the electoral races. So part of this presentation is showing you specific resources for further information to see candidate history and who aligns with your views. So I'm going to spend a chunk of time talking about how you should visit candidate websites if you want to hear what they have to say for themselves, as well as asking you to apply your news literacy skills to find information about them that's hopefully more neutral than the candidate website specifically will be. So if you happen to be right near the Knoxville Public Library, this is what your ballot is going to look like on the first page. Here on the first page, you can see that it's listed federal offices, state offices, and some of the county offices. So these ballots on the front of your, or these races on the front of your ballots are all partisan races. So you'll see next to each of the candidates, there's a little three-letter designation of what party they are, and on the furthest left column you can see what party they belong to. So obviously we've got Democratic and Republican candidates on most of these, well, not even most of them, on several of these races, as well as for the presidential candidates, you have several third-party candidates. So these are the partisan races, like I was saying, and I'm going to go through each of these and talk a little bit about who's running. I am not going to talk about the presidential race. It's a highly contentious issue, and there are more than enough ways for you to make your own informed opinions about the presidential race. But based on how highly partisan it is, I'm not going to be discussing the presidential race tonight. So here's what the back of your ballot looks like. This is the part where I get a little not fatigued, but like really confused and not sure what's going on. So for these offices, they are all non-partisan. So it means that there's not a party associated with, any of the candidates on the list here, as well as you'll see something called judge retention or judicial ballot for judge retention. And I'll talk about what that is and why it's kind of cool, as well as a public measure, which I will once again be talking about. So what's on my ballot? Just a quick breakdown of the offices up for grabs in 2020 and kind of more about what they mean. Before I get started on that, Ballotpedia is one of your best friends when it comes to learning about your ballot. I used Ballotpedia so much when I was building this presentation, and I could get lost in the void forever of learning about elections both at the state level and nationwide, and what they mean, and what races are contested and considered battleground states. Lots of great stuff like that. So I would absolutely recommend that you go visit Ballotpedia, both to learn about candidates specifically in a great nonpartisan way, and also just like learn cool stuff about elections and electoral history. But for the federal offices, like I said, the federal offices that are on your ballot this year are for president, for U.S. senator, and for U.S. representative. The Senate races, 33 out of the 100 Senate seats are on the ballot. One of those, of course, is here in Iowa. 12 Democratic seats and 23 Republican-held seats are up for election this year. So one of them, obviously, Joni Ernst is currently one of our senators at the federal level. Senators serve 6-year terms, so she's served about 5 years at this point, and so she's up for re-election. I don't know off the top of my head when our other senator, Chuck Grassley, is up for re-election, but it's either in 2 or 4 years. They're all staggered, of course, so both of your senators aren't going to be up for election in the same year. And then for U.S. representative, representatives serve 2-year terms. So every other year, on an even year, there's going to be all of your representatives are on the ballot. So we here live in District 2. Here in Marion County, it's essentially the southeastern quarter of the state of Iowa is District 2. So we have an open seat this year because the current representative for our district, Dave Loebsack, is retiring. So it's what's considered an open seat because the incumbent is not running for re-election. Those are generally more up for grabs seats because incumbents definitely have a bias as far as people are more likely to vote someone back into office than to vote them into office initially. So having an open seat is cool and scary depending on which party you belong to. For state offices, so both of our state representatives, our state senator and our state representative, are running uncontested. Amy Sinclair is a Republican senator. We're in District 14. So she's served since 2013. I believe state senators serve 4-year terms, although I don't remember quite off the top of my head. But so she's up for a re-election. And then state representative John Thorup, also Republican. We're here in District 28. He was initially elected in 2018, and he's up for re-election here in 2020. So I'm not going to talk very much about these 2 races at all because they're uncontested. If you want to learn more about what your representatives are doing, what committees they belong to, visit their Ballotpedia pages, their candidate websites, or Iowa legislator pages to learn more about them. and maybe consider, if you want to see them, stay in or get kicked out in future elections. That's going to be kind of up to you. And then so for the county and nonpartisan offices, across Marion County, you're going to see election for Board of Supervisors, County Auditor, County Sheriff, Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioner, County Agricultural Extension Council. There's also township officials, which I somehow forgot to put on there. And so I'm going to talk about all those. I'm going to discuss those offices more than I am going to discuss the candidates, because these are not contended races. So there's either only one person on the ballot for each of these. So auditor and sheriff and board of supervisors are all partisan, but they're all running uncontested. So I'm not going to talk specifically about them as much as I'm going to talk about their offices. And then for soil and water, ag extension, and township official, I'm just going to talk about the offices. So, and then retention is another thing that's on your ballot. So that's state Supreme Court, state Court of Appeals, district court. And then once again, I'm going to discuss judge retention as a whole and not individual judges. And then the public measure, so that's statewide. The question on it is, shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and propose amendment or amendments to the same? So I'm going to talk about what that is and why it's on your ballot. So your candidates for federal office. For the Senate, we have Joni Ernst, incumbent, facing Teresa Greenfield, the Democratic challenger, and then Rita Hart is a Democrat running for representative for District 2, and Marionette Miller Meeks is a Republican running for representative of District 2. So here we have our first candidate profile. Senator Joni Ernst received her bachelor's degree from Iowa State University, and she received her master's of public administration from Columbia College. So that's her educational background, her professional career. She was in the U.S. Army and Iowa National Guard. She was first elected to office in 2005 as Montgomery County Auditor. She served in that role for 6 years. Then she went to be an Iowa State Senator for District 48. She served one term there. And then as a state senator for District 12, she also served, I believe, a term. I think the first one was a partial term, because you can see it's only about 2 years there. And then so she's been a U.S. Senator since 2015, and she's up for re-election in 2020, which will go into effect in 2021, whoever wins. So some of her notable endorsements, she and a number of other freshman senators from both parties were endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and she's also been endorsed by the Tea Party. Her top 3 issues listed on her website are Make 'em Squeal, which just a little bit about that if you're not familiar. So her whole thing there is that national debt needs to be brought under control, and that people in Congress are either getting paid too much, or they're getting paid too many perks, or there are too many perks for ex-presidents. So she's working to help cut back on that and focus more on responsible spending. Her second issue, growing our rural economy. So this is focused largely on deregulating, land use. So environmental protections are seen as a burden that is unnecessary, and that it's holding back Iowa's economy. So she's looking to do that, as well as she also has listed here identifying solutions for affordable quality healthcare for Iowans, access to mental health care, internet. So a variety of things that would help improve the rural economy. And then her last, or not her last, there are about 8 usually issues on each candidate's website. And because I only have time for a couple, I'm just doing the first 3. So her last one is keeping America safe and secure. So that one, kind of lumping it together, giving a little summary. She's focusing on, care for troops that have come back to the United States after serving, and border protection. So those are her 3 main issues. And if you want to learn more about Joni Ernst, please do visit her Ballotpedia page, visit her campaign website, and then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about other resources where you can get information about candidates from third-party sources. Next, we have Teresa Greenfield running for a U.S. Senator. She received her she received her associates from Iowa Lakes Community College, her bachelor's from Iowa State University, and her master's from Mankato State University. Her professional history is in farming and urban planning and real estate. She has not held prior elected office. Her notable endorsements include the Iowa AFL-CIO, so it's the American Federated League of, I had it written down, but so it's unions. So the biggest nationwide union, the Iowa chapter, endorsed her. And then also End Citizens United has endorsed her. So you might remember from a couple weeks ago, I talked about the Citizens United decision and campaign election funding, or in campaign funding laws. So End Citizens United is an organization that is looking to end Citizens United and get election or campaign funding to be more regulated. So the top 3 issues that she lists on her website are healthcare. She is interested in reducing healthcare costs, increasing access, especially in rural areas, and reducing big pharma, drug prices, all that jazz. And then so the second one is economy and jobs. So that's basically saying that she supports unions as well as collective bargaining in general when it comes to labor and labor rights, things like that, living wage, small business support, especially during COVID. And then I think I skipped one. No, I didn't. I forgot to put the third one on there. But her third one is education. So making education widely available and accessible, especially to low-income folks, so that people don't have to take on as much student debt, as well as education is more accessible. So you can learn more about Teresa Greenfield by visiting her Ballotpedia page or her campaign website, both of which are listed here. And then we move on to the race for U.S. Representative for Iowa District 2. Democrat Rita Hart is looking to replace Democrat Dave Loebsack. So she got her associates from North Iowa Area Community College. The University of Northern Iowa is where she got her bachelor's, and the University of Iowa is where she got her master's. So she has been working as a farmer and an educator throughout her professional career. She has previously served as a state senator for District 49 from 2013 to 2019. Some notable endorsements that she received: Republicans for Rita is a group of approximately 20 Republicans who endorsed her her run for office, and former President Barack Obama also endorsed her. Her top 3 issues, she lists tackling political corruption in Washington. So what she lists is, so there's something called the revolving door, which is where, members of Congress stop being, elected legislators and they immediately become lobbyists, which presents conflicts of interest. So she's interested in banning that. And as well as, generally preventing conflicts of interest by doing things like banning members of Congress from owning individual stocks or serving on corporate boards, reducing waste by having a no budget, no pay law, so that congressional pay is tied to passing of a budget, which several other legislators, across, the candidates are interested in doing here in Iowa, as well as ending Citizens United. And she wants to end partisan gerrymandering. And then for jobs and growing our economy, so basically it's equal opportunity, helping businesses opening back up safely after the COVID, or during/after COVID, reducing the cost of college, as well as raising the minimum wage, and then expanding childcare, and then so making healthcare more affordable and accessible. Is kind of exactly what it says. So she's interested in expanding healthcare, especially in rural areas, making sure that Americans aren't worried, or Iowans and Americans aren't worried about, that one medical bill that's going to send them under. Okay. And then so we have Mariannette Miller Meeks, who's a Republican running to replace Democrat David Loebsack. I must have forgotten to finish her education slide, but she went to Texas Christian University for her bachelor's degree, and then I think she went to the University of Texas at Austin for her MD. So she served as an Army nurse, as well as an ophthalmologist in private practice for about 20 years, and she also had a brief stint teaching ophthalmology at a college here in Iowa. So she has her current term for elected office. She's serving as Iowa State Senator in District 41. Obviously, if she's elected to this office, her term will end as a state senator, and there will be a special election in that district to replace her. Some of her notable endorsements include Senator Joni Ernst, as well as a coalition of local law enforcement officers in her area in Iowa. Her top 3 issues include government accountability, which is essentially looks the same as Joni Ernst's Make 'em Squeal idea, where she wants to cut back on spending in Congress. She, like her competitor Rita Hart, is interested in having like a no budget, no pay situation, as well as passing nationwide law that the budget must be balanced every year instead of debt increasing on the national level. As far as healthcare, so she's a doctor, is interested in making prescription drugs more affordable and making sure that people have access to robust healthcare through their employers. And then she also lists that she is pro-life on her website, and that's pretty self-explanatory. You can learn more about Marionette Miller Meeks by visiting her Ballotpedia page or her campaign website, both of which are once again listed here. Okay, so briefly, your state legislators, these are the folks that represent us at the state level. So Senator Amy Sinclair has been, so she has worked as a farmer, as well as she was elected to the Wayne County Board of Supervisors. She's been serving for our district since 2013. John Thorpe is our representative. He attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy and became a state police officer and then a road trooper. He's also been a volunteer firefighter, and he was the state fire marshal. He has been a member of the board for the State Patrol Officers Council and the Iowa State Troopers Association, and he was elected in 2018 and has been serving our district since 2019. So that's who represents us at the state level. Now getting into the meat of the county and nonpartisan offices, aka the races that most people are less familiar with if they're anything like me. So first things first, our Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors determine what your tax dollars do. So these are the folks, if you have ever had an opinion about anything that has ever happened in Knoxville, whether it be taxes being raised, what's happening with the roads, anything like that, that's the Board of Supervisors, and that's why you should care about them. So they also are in charge of appointing members to boards and committees. As you can see, there's a huge long list here. So when you're electing your Board of Supervisors, you're not just electing them, they are choosing the people to go on all of these boards. So they do a bunch of stuff. You can visit their their page on the website about, to learn more about what they do. The folks that are up on your ballot, depending on obviously which part of Marion County you're in. For the Board of Supervisors, it's going to be Steve McCombs and Mark Ramey are both up for re-election this year. And Casey Johnner is not up for re-election this year, but she's currently serving on the Board of Supervisors. So Marion County Auditor, once again, it's a partisan race, but it's uncontested. Our current County Auditor is Jake Grandia. So the Marion County Auditor does a whole bunch of stuff, including running the entire election for Marion County. So all this stuff, I'm very thankful to the help that the Auditor's Office has given me over the course of this series. But the Marion County Auditor's Office also keeps track of financial records as well as real estate transfer records. So a lot of the nitty gritty, the records maintenance. So all that stuff. So Marion County Sheriff, Jason Sandholt is one of the folks that I had the privilege of talking to on the phone over the last couple of days, and he let me know. So the sheriff and the county attorney are the highest / only elected law enforcement or prosecution positions in the county. That means that everyone else is appointed or hired, which he says that makes sure that the sheriff and the county attorney actually serve the people. And they have that local focus. The sheriff oversees 50 employees, as well as a 56-bed jail here in Marion County. The sheriff partners with city law enforcement for within the limits of the town or city, but they also are the ones who, the sheriff's office are the ones who are in charge of, like traffic enforcement and other stuff like that outside of city limits. And so Jason Sandholt was a former DNR officer, but he switched to, law enforcement because he saw it as more rewarding and feeling like he was giving back more to the community. He's running for his third 4-year term as a sheriff. So yeah, he will have worked for 12 years as a sheriff after this election, and he says he's going to reevaluate at that point to see if he wants to continue. And what he says about voting is he truly believes that voting is a civic duty to keep government serving the people and keep it accountable. So that's words of wisdom from Sheriff Jason Fanholt. So, and township officials, I had a really hard time figuring out what these folks do. I am very glad that I did, though, because township officers, they're elected positions, but what they do is they do things like, you know, fire and rescue, they help maintain cemeteries, they do repairs, they do like tort liability insurance and resolve fence disputes, which is all kind of wild. You know, and they, you know, maintain records of proceedings and records and all stuff like that. So township officials, they're nonpartisan positions. This is the first of the nonpartisan offices that I'm talking about. So with these kinds of races, as well as the next couple that I'll talk about, they are not folks who are in it for the glory. I think that I have it, you know, listed on the next page, but yeah, so Dale Voss talked to me about how people are often asked to run for those kinds of office because of their experience and their passion for that specific work. So I know as head, I wouldn't say that you should vote for any particular candidate, but if you don't really have an opinion on these nonpartisan offices, my recommendation is to go ahead and vote for them because, you know, someone out there thinks that they were qualified enough to suggest that they run and to ask them to run. But so for the Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioner, what these folks do is they give guidance and oversight to the local district regarding conservation practices, including allocating funds for projects on private land, as well as, you know, providing education in schools and then generally managing the watershed in the area. So these folks are a really cool resource if you're like a farmer or if you have land that you're interested in making more environmentally friendly in the sense that, you know, helping to reduce water runoff. One of the things that Dale talked with me about was, you know, like bacteria levels in like red rock can be reduced through, you know, proper land management by farmers because we have a big issue with water runoff. Here, you know, I believe we're in the Mississippi Valley watershed. It's a huge, huge watershed, and the results that it's having is that down in the Gulf of Mexico, actually, all of the farm runoff, you know, all the bacteria are going down, and it's causing huge, huge algae blooms that are like destroying some of the ecosystem down there. So the work we're doing up here, you know, is affecting the Gulf of Mexico. So, you know, kind of things that Dale told me, the Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioners serve as a local voice with local knowledge to work with state and federal agencies. So obviously they work with the Army Corps of Engineers, you know, other, you know, state and federal agencies with, you know, like the big knowledge and the big money, and then the Soil and Water District Commissioners help them apply that knowledge to the specific cases of around here. And Dale Voss, I already talked about how the people that are running for these nonpartisan offices are asked to. But the fun fact that he had for me was that Marion County was actually one of the first counties in Iowa to establish the Soil and Water Conservation District, and they recently celebrated the 75th year anniversary of that at their annual Farmers Appreciation Banquet. So I thought that was kind of cool, and he says that's something that we can be proud of. So a little bit about the judicial retention and ballot measures. So Iowa is one of 21 states that holds judicial retention elections. This type of election focuses on keeping judges impartial and fair as they serve their term behind the bench. How that works is that judges are appointed based on a merit system, and then the Iowa public votes to keep them in office or to get rid of them. If you want to learn more about judicial retention, you can visit judicialfacts.org. But you know, basically what I got out of visiting judicialfacts.org myself, a survey of nearly 1,500 attorneys participated in the Bar Association's Judicial Retention Performance Review, or Judicial Performance Review, and, you know, an overwhelming majority said that all the judges should be retained. My understanding is that it's pretty rare that it's suggested that judges aren't retained. Back in 2009, after the Iowa courts ruled that, you know, same-sex marriage should be legal in Iowa, 3 of those judges were not retained after that because people were upset about the decision. The judicialfacts.org does note that voting not to retain judges does not change any of the decisions that they made. It just removes them from serving behind the bench. So that's judicial retention. And then the ballot measure. So this particular question has in fact appeared on the ballot every 10 years since 1970, but a constitutional convention has not been held in 163 years in Iowa, which is when the Iowa State Constitution was written. I was not familiar with this ballot measure because I have only been voting since about 2016. So it was new for me, and I was really interested to see what that was about. But the idea behind it is that it gives Iowans the opportunity to make state politicians re-examine the state constitution and important values if they see that it's necessary. You can learn more about it at We Are Iowa. They have a whole article about both judicial retention and the ballot measure that's up for grabs. Kind of what it says is basically, they don't see it happening unless there's some like major movement in Iowa that is asking, that Iowans are really passionate about, and they're interested in, changing the state constitution for it. They see it as kind of a high risk thing where, once the whole constitution has the opportunity to be revised, you could lose some of the good stuff that has been helping to keep Iowa going. And the idea is that for the most part, people have been kind of satisfied with the functioning of the state constitution. But that question is there, and if you think that stuff needs to change, then, vote for that convention. Okay. So there are a whole bunch of places that you can visit for more information on the candidates. I said it earlier, and I will say it again. This presentation, it could go on for hours and hours, and there would be no way for me to adequately give you a full idea of, the candidates, the things that are on your ballot, especially because I have my own opinions and you have your own opinions, or maybe perhaps you need to form your opinions. And so from here on out, I say that it's going to be up to you to continue being an informed voter. Some places that you can visit are KCCI's 2020 General Election Candidate Guide. You can just Google that and it'll come right up. So what that looks like is all of the candidates in Iowa were given an identical survey to fill out, and their responses are posted online at the KCCI website. If you want to find another candidate profile, KWQC, which is a Quad Cities-based news station, has profiles for District 2, since they are also in District 2. So if you want to learn more about specifically Rita Hart or Marionette Miller Meeks, you can visit them. They're also, you may not know this, but there have been debates between Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield, as well as Rita Hart and Marionette Miller Meeks. And you can find those recorded on the Iowa Press Debates on Iowa PBS. So if you're interested in actually hearing those candidates speak instead of just reading stuff on your screen, to get a feel for what those candidates are like, and you can stomach watching more debates, go ahead and go check those out. As well as always, you can visit folks' Ballotpedia pages or their individual candidate websites. Those are all great resources for where you can go to, help form your opinion about those candidates. Which brings me to some of my final thoughts as we come to a close for this series. So real quickly, I do want to talk about voting in Marion County specifically. When you go in to vote, remember that Iowa does have a mandatory voter ID law, which means that you have to have one of the things on this list in order to vote. If you don't have one of those with you and you go in to vote, you can ask for a provisional ballot, and you fill out that provisional ballot, and as long as you return to the Marion County Auditor's Office with the appropriate form of identification within, I believe, a week of voting, then your ballot will be cast. And as a reminder, if your ID expired in 2020, you can still use it to vote in the election as long as it was valid at some point during 2020. The last day that you can request an absentee ballot is October 24th. And so that absentee ballot request must be received by the Marion County Auditor by 5 p.m. that day. That is a Saturday. I really suggest not waiting to request your ballot or to return it, because the sooner you send in your ballot, the more likely you are to be able to fix a problem if there is a problem. So if there is a problem with your ballot, the county auditor's office is required to notify you within 24 hours and send it back to give you the time to fix that issue so that you can return your ballot and get it counted. You can also register to vote online if you haven't already registered to vote until October 24th, or you can register to vote in person up until Election Day, which is November 3rd. The Marion County Auditor's Office, if you're interested in in-person voting, is currently open to the public for election purposes at their temporary location at 614 East Washington Street. That's the old building for East Elementary. If Any of you remember that? So early voting is during their open hours, so which is Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. every week from now until November 3rd. I remember seeing somewhere that there was a day of Saturday voting, and I believe that's October 24th, but I don't super remember. But it's those same hours, and you can call the Mayor and County Auditor's Office and ask. So most of the things at the Auditor's Office right now are by appointment only, but you can walk in to go do your voting. You do not have to have an appointment to vote right now. And if you did request an absentee ballot and you received it in the mail, but you changed your mind and you want to vote in person, you can totally do that. But make sure that you bring the ballot that you received in the mail with you and exchange it at the polling place. Otherwise, potentially they'll issue you a provisional ballot until which point you return the ballot that you are mailed, in the mail. It's an election security thing to make sure that you don't vote twice. So you can totally do that, but like I said, bring your absentee ballot with you when you come in to vote in person. And as a reminder, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, and polls are going to be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And if you want to learn more about what your ballot looks like before you actually vote, you can find your sample ballot online and your polling place before you vote. Visit the general election page on the Marion County Auditor's website to learn more about your specific polling place if you're interested in voting, on November 3rd. But if you're going to do in-person voting anytime before then, it will be at the auditor's office. So the only time you would go to your designated polling place is if you are going to be voting on November 3rd. And as a reminder, you cannot return your absentee ballot to your polling place. You can return it to the auditor's office or a designated ballot drop spot, which I believe here is just at the auditor's office. And yeah, you can also obviously return your ballot in the mail, but as long as your ballot is postmarked by Election Day, so November 3rd here in Iowa, it will be counted. Other states, it has to be received by November 3rd, but here in Iowa, it has to be postmarked. But as I've been saying, please, please, please vote as soon as possible to make sure, or to be as sure as you possibly can that your vote is going to be counted. Okay, so bringing it all together across these 4 weeks, please, please, please continue to apply your news literacy techniques to everything you encounter, both politically and otherwise. So TV ads and other political devices like mailings or those opinion surveys that you might be getting over the phone, someone is paying for them and they all have an agenda. So my advice is to ignore them entirely. If you get something in the mail that's trying to make you, clearly is trying to make you not vote for someone or to vote for someone, toss it in the trash, recycle it, read it, maybe have a laugh, but find a more balanced, unbiased source for your information and never accept ads at face value. So if you read something on that mailing or hear something on that ad, don't let that be as far as you go, as far as your involvement. If you hear something you're interested in learning more, find an unbiased news source so that you can see what's actually up there, because there's always going to be spin, slant, swing, every bad journalistic technique in political attack ads. So, like I said, ignore them and practice keeping yourself informed to avoid giving yourself the excuse not to vote. So you might remember from a couple weeks ago, one of the things I talked about is people felt like they just didn't know enough. They felt like their vote didn't matter. There's a long list of reasons why people didn't feel the need to vote. If you keep yourself informed about government and elections, even, a little bit, it's going to help increase your interest in voting and your feeling like you have a civic duty in order to vote. And please do as well invite other people to vote. The most effective method of both extending your own voice at the polls as well as increasing civic participation is asking someone you know to vote and making a voting plan with them. So my suggestion, think of 3 people that you're going to ask to vote. Ask them how they're going to vote, and then check in with each other to make sure that you have voted so that you have that accountability. And then if you're interested, please do get involved beyond Election Day. November 3rd, it's not going to destroy the world and it's not going to fix everything. Just voting should not be all that you do as far as being involved in your community. It's really important for us to be involved, and that can be in whatever way you see fit. It can be volunteering, with a local organization. It can be volunteering with your church. It can be holding a voter registration drive at the high school to get young people voted or registered and excited about voting. There are so many things that you can do to help give back to your community, and I believe that that is all attached to voting in the sense that, as people who live here, we get so much from the community and so much from the government that I believe it's our responsibility to give back to our community and participate. Okay, so, and then just some quick reminders about voting. My recommendation is to vote in person in early voting or on election day if you can. Obviously, if you have safety concerns regarding COVID-19, or if you can't make it out to the early voting or election day, then very thoroughly follow all the directions included in your ballot. So use black ink and remember to sign into your affidavit and mail it back in as soon as possible. But voting in person is going to be the best way to make sure that your ballot is counted, because if there are any issues at that time, they can immediately say, hey, you got to do this thing. And then you can fix it and you can know for certain that your vote is going to be counted. And please never post a picture of your ballot online, especially not if it's filled out, but always brag about voting on social media to remind others to vote. And it's totally allowed to pull up your phone if you're in the voting booth, or if you're at home looking at your ballot. It's not a test. You can Google the candidates, you can Google the issues. If you feel like you need to know more, that's totally allowed, and you can take as much time as you need to vote. It's not a test. So remember that you can do that. And so finding resources online is super easy. Just remember to apply your critical news literacy skills to make sure that your resources are legit. So that brings me to the end of my presentation today. Just as a reminder, all 4 classes in the voter education series are posted on the Knoxville Public Library's YouTube channel, and they can be accessed through the online programming tab on the library website. All of these things, except for this particular ballot, are relevant past election day. News literacy never stops. Your civic duty to vote never stops. The history of elections and voting never stops. So if you are interested, pass that information along, rewatch these things after election day. Figure out ways to get involved. And thank you so much to the Knoxville Public Library for sponsoring this program. It has been amazing. And that's all I got.
I'm going to say no, thank you. Wonderful. Thanks, Melissa. There may be some questions. Do we have time for that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we ended kind of early today, like I expected we would. So if there are questions, great. And if not, then we can take an early night.
Okay. I think that a chat should be open for people. In the meantime, while you're gathering your thoughts and writing, I have a few. Thank you, first of all, for addressing the question about can I Google, can I use my phone? That is good to know. Let's say I decide to do in-person voting, but maybe I need some help understanding the ballot or filling it out. Am I allowed to bring somebody in with me? Or like there might be an individual who, I don't know, maybe they struggle with reading or something like that. Can they have a helper?
That's a super good question. My guess is that if you need assistance in voting specifically, like if you need someone to read things out loud to you, then that's an ADA issue, and your polling place is required to either provide you with assistance or allow you to bring your assistance. As far as bringing like other adults into the booth with you, I'm not totally sure about that, but you can totally bring your kids with you if you want to teach them about voting and get them excited about voting. Get them involved in any way you can. If you're voting, in person, you can, have them, like hand over your ID to the poll worker, have them talk about, what they're doing, and you can, talk to them about the importance of voting, on the drive there. Show them your ballot, explain it as you're going through it. That's totally allowed. And building voters from young up is, the very most effective way of getting people to be lifelong voters is, educating them from little on about the importance of voting.
Great. How do people figure out where their polling place is?
Yes, so you can visit the Marion County Auditor's General Election page, and on there is a map of all of the polling precincts. And then, from there, you can see where you're at on that map, or you can look it up by address and see where your polling place is. A lot of the resources that I mentioned in previous presentations, I believe specifically in my second presentation, that give you both, where to like register to vote, how to check the status of your absentee ballot, all those informational sites will also help you find your polling place. So if you find that the auditor's office website is a little difficult for you to navigate, the other educational resources that are out there are, geared towards accessibility and making sure that you can find your polling place. Like you can enter in your address and then it'll give you the address for your polling place. So like iowavote.org, when we vote, Poll Save or Vote Save America, all those sites are going to have those kinds of resources.
Right. Now that I say that, I think I remember last big election, I believe we tried to print out a map here at the library, so you can always call the library too if you're having trouble navigating, or maybe your internet's not working and you're in a panic. I can't figure out, what site to go to figure it out. Don't let that be an excuse to not vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's never an excuse not to vote.
Here's a question from chat. What can you tell us about poll watchers?
Okay.
Oh, and a second question, so answer in whichever order you prefer. This one speaks to the earlier question about assistance. If someone were blind, are there Braille ballots available?
Yes, so all polling places are required to have accessibility accommodations for voting. So I think for blindness specifically, there'd either be a special machine that does include Braille ballots, or you have like headphones or something and they read the selections to you and you select them. I don't know a ton about ADA compliance as far as voting, but I know that accessibility is like the law as far as helping people get out to vote. And then so poll watchers, it depends the capacity of the poll watchers themselves. So if you're just a civilian and you're going in to make sure that no funny business is going on, that could actually be considered voter intimidation, which is against the law, and you could be fined or jailed. If you do anything like that. Another reminder that I forgot actually to put on my previous slide about reminders about voting: if you're going to the polling place, you cannot wear anything political. So you cannot wear anything to represent the candidate that you are voting for. You can't wear a little pin that says check my ID. You can't do anything that could be considered showing partisan within 50 feet of the polling place. And that's a law to prevent voter intimidation, because back in the past, there were like, specifically to intimidate and stymie the African-American vote, mobs would stand outside the polling place and beat people, or Black people who tried to come in and vote. So anything like that is totally illegal. As far as specific poll watchers, I honestly don't know a bunch about it. But so civilian poll watchers are like kind of not allowed. And if there are specific hired poll watchers, then I think that you can contact the county auditors about doing that, or asking if they needed more help. If you're interested in being involved on election day, definitely do get in contact with your county auditor. And I tried to. They said that they were pretty full up, and they had an overwhelming number of people volunteer this year, which is great. But you can still reach out to let them know that you're interested in helping out in the election in any way you can. But as far as poll watchers themselves, I will admit I am not super well informed.
Early voting has begun, and you can go in person to vote at the county auditor's office. Now you said that goes until the 3rd. Now on the 3rd, can I still go to the auditor's office, or do I then have to go to my polling place?
On the 3rd, you'll need to go to your polling place.
Okay, that's good. All right. Anyone else? Not seeing anything at the moment. Let me double check my list once again. You're very thorough. We appreciate that. Okay. All right. So I guess we have everything we need to be informed voters, competent voters. We're going to vote. We're going to invite others to vote with us. Any last thoughts?
No, other than just the fact that, just because this class is over does not mean that the things that I said in this presentation should end after the 2020 elections. This is something that is going to extend for the rest of your lives. So keep all this in mind, and spread the good word out to folks that you know.
Okay. Well, thank you sincerely. Thanks everyone who has been attending regularly. As always, this is being recorded. We will post it within the next day or two, so please feel free to watch again, share within your circle, or share it far and wide, right? And I guess that's about it. All right, we will see you at the polls. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.